Petersen, coming to you from the Hayden Planetarium in New York City. I wanted to give you a few takeaways from the recent United Nations Summit and Climate Week here being held in New York and what they mean for Australian business. Now, following on from the UN SDG Summit, the focus at this summit, being the Climate Ambition Summit during the 78th UN General Assembly, was very much focused on SDG 13, climate action. The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, opened this particular summit and laid out a comprehensive plan with concrete action points proposed in his acceleration agenda. It included, first, a phasing out of coal by 2030 for countries of the OECD and by other countries by 2040. Second, eliminating fossil fuel subsidies. Third, overhauling multilateral development banks to support climate action. Next, replenishing the Green Climate Fund and upholding the US $100 billion climate finance commitment, which still hasn't been met. And then finally, operationalising the Loss and Damage Fund at the upcoming meeting of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, to be held at the 28th meeting in Dubai starting in late November. Now, the UN Secretary-General stressed the importance that poorest nations have a right to be angry about the lagging ambition, the lacking climate finance, and the skyrocketing cost of credit to address climate impacts. For their part, companies, institutions and the private sector making interventions at this particular summit were particularly interesting. Firstly, our own Tanya Plibersek, the Minister for the Environment, Water and Heritage, made an intervention at this particular summit, noting that Australia's efforts to expand renewables-based electricity to 82% by 2030 was on track, interesting, and that there was a commitment to develop battery storage. Canada, for its part, invited countries to join the global carbon pricing challenge and pledged to cut methane emissions from the oil and gas sector by 75% by 2030. He also announced, this is Prime Minister Trudeau, announced that Canada aims to be the first G20 nation to phase out fossil fuel subsidies by 2023. Denmark, for its commitments, indicated that it was moving up its net zero deadline from 2050 to 2045, was setting an end date for oil and gas production in Denmark by 2050 or sooner, and that it would deliver 1% of the developed country's collective goal of mobilising the US $100 billion climate financing commitment in 2022, 2024. Germany announced that it had plans to phase out coal by 2038 and that it would triple its renewable energy capacity by 2030 rather. It also announced that at the upcoming COP, it would launch the Climate Club, which would be a group that would be there to make decarbonised industry production their business model. So something to look forward to, I guess. Iceland announced that it had stopped licensing oil exploration in its exclusive economic zone and had legislated carbon neutrality by 2040. Indonesia, to our north, highlighted the need to add value to raw minerals at source and called for supporting a program of work on a just transition that was, in its words, country-led and country-owned. Thailand also, in its intervention, noted its plans had been made to phase out coal by 2040. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, reported that the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, of which the City of Sydney is a member, has pledged to cut fossil fuel consumption in its member cities in half by 2030. And Fatih Birol, the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, actually presented data on the rapid growth of renewables around the globe, showing that coal, oil and natural gas use will actually peak within the decade, but stressed that progress in decarbonising heavy industry is actually stalling. The Chief Executive Officer of Allianz, Olivier Bate, lamented that the end of an era of robust growth and low inflation was making economic transformation all that more challenging, but stressed that inaction at this point would be foolish and even more irrational. And then finally, Mark Carney, the UN Special Envoy on Climate and Action and Finance, called on all multi-development banks to catalyse finance to reduce emissions from heavy emitting industries, and announced that there would be a net zero data public utility to be launched at COP28. In closing, the incoming UNFCCC COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber from the United Arab Emirates emphasised his aspiration for COP28 to deliver progress on three things: closing the mitigation gap, phasing down fossil fuels while phasing up zero carbon alternatives, tripling renewable energy by 2030, and with that supporting the energy transition by minimising permission timelines and wherever possible supercharging investments in battery storage and energy efficiency. He also encouraged all countries to sign the Leaders' Declaration on Food Systems, Agriculture and Climate Change, and finally noted that COP28 will feature a ministerial dialogue on climate and health, which is a first, and said that mayors from around the world were being invited to showcase their achievements at this upcoming COP, which is also a first. So in terms of the implications of these outcomes for Australia and its climate policy, a couple of questions come to mind. The first is, how can Australia align its energy policies with the UN Secretary-General's acceleration agenda? What steps can be taken now to meet or exceed an 82% renewables target by 2030? And how can Australia contribute to initiatives like the Global Carbon Pricing Challenge? For its part, Climate Week New York City, which sits in the context of this summit, held over 500 events right across the city of New York through the convening power of the Climate Group. Interestingly, this time nature was a key component of the program. We all know that the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure launched its final recommendation in the heart of the world's capital market, being Wall Street, and specifically on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. In terms of issues that were addressed, there was a wide variety, but I took away that industrial decarbonisation, supercharging battery storage, and the question of the role of critical minerals for the energy transition were three that were standouts. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development, for its part, had 15 events alone. Its focus going forward will be on building out the corporate performance and the accountability system for carbon. Now, initially this means working with members to identify the pain points and the potential solutions to develop what we hope will be a fit-for-purpose system in four key areas. Firstly, target setting. Next, transition plans. Third, carbon accounting. And fourth, and probably most importantly for some, particularly the investor sector, reporting and disclosure. So stay tuned for more news on this important program of work from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia, and connect with us via our website, LinkedIn, or contact us at BCSDA@bcsda.org.au.